is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
A very pleasant good afternoon. Welcome to the program as we continue to swim our way into the latter part of this week, and we'll cover a number of stories. Somehow, some way, since Monday night, Cardale Jones has become one of the big stories anywhere, and he will declare, I'm not kidding yet now, he will declare in an hour whether he's coming out for the NFL or sticking around for his senior. I don't even know how long's the guy been there. It seems like we've only been talking about him a couple of days. Cardale Jones will announce his intentions. It's very interesting because he has emerged, and some are advising him to stay. Others are saying, what good will it do to ride the bench after leading Ohio State to a national championship? We'll certainly cover that in great detail here in a couple of minutes. A couple of other guests as well. We'll look at the recruiting landscape as we get closer to national signing date. That's a standard in mid-January, which we have now reached. Also, what's going on in Baton Rouge? Certainly, we don't know. We had Kevin Steele on yesterday. I thought Kevin Steele was an interesting interview. He was very glib about everything but why he went or why he accepted the job at LSU. On that subject, his answers were 3 and 4 words long. Not sure what the circumstances were in his departure from the University of Alabama. Same for Lance Thompson, who left Alabama to go to Auburn. Normally, you would think that is the beginning of the end of Nick Saban when you lose 2 defensive coaches on the same day, except some people don't think it went down exactly like that. So we'll look a little bit deeper into that subject. I heard Les Miles late last night talk about it, and he was fairly tight-lipped as well. So my question, and we'll try to answer that in about 30 minutes with Matt Moscona from ESPN in Baton Rouge, is what is going on in Baton Rouge, and are there serious problems down there? Kevin Steele, not that much in demand as a defensive coordinator. We're not even sure he was in demand to stay on the Alabama staff, but he is now the defensive coordinator at LSU. There is speculation that Les Miles wanted Kirby Smart, but would someone tell me why Kirby Smart would leave Alabama? As battered as Alabama is right now, still finished number 4 in the country. Where is LSU in the SEC West? Are they the number 4 team with continuing problems at the quarterback position? So we'll get into that. We'll get to your phone calls at 855-242-7285, 855-242-7285. That's the number. We'll start with some phone calls here, and we begin in Houston, and James is up first. How are you, James?
2 days ago, and I believe you had a columnist from the Sporting News.
That is correct.
Don't remember his name.
Bill Bender was his name.
Bender, yes, okay. Very articulate, you know. But I mean, his thinking was every bit as insular and you know, circular as you know, Southern hayseeds are accused of being about the SEC. I mean, you know, the Big Ten did great this year, especially in crunch time and the bowl games and stuff. That doesn't rewrite history or anything, you know. I mean,
no, but James, we're not writing a book of history here. We cover this in the moment, as you well know. We've had enough conversations about that, and
yeah,
and you know, I understand where they're coming from. I mean, you know, the history of Moses being in the desert for as long as he was. I mean, hey, by the way, I'm not trying to compare Urban Meyer to Moses, but the point is that the Big Ten finally had something good. I mean, really, this started a year ago on January 1st. I remember being at the Rose Bowl, James. You may have heard me refer to this a couple of times. And when Michigan State beat Stanford at the Rose Bowl, I mean, there was celebration, and I'm like looking at friends going, what's the big deal? I didn't understand I did understand how down the Big Ten, that was really important to them. This was 100 times more important than that, and the Wisconsin game and other games really mattered. For the first time in a long time, there was the smell of blood in the air, that the SEC, this almighty league that had 8 straight national championship appearances, looked vulnerable, particularly after a year when, guess what, all we did, we being the media, was talk about how tough the SEC was, how great the SEC was, the Mississippi schools, the Alabama schools. You know the narrative.
Right. And I think a lot of that is still true. It's just that it the legacy of that is not going to last. I mean, the fact that the SEC did go 7-5, they didn't win the.
James, what is that? Explain to me something. And I know the SEC office and the SEC network, and everyone's been promoting the 7-5. What does that 7-5 record mean to you?
It means, I know what it means to me is that they won all they won 4 or 5 of the more, minor or midland bowls.
I mean, let me make it simple for you. The SEC won bowl games in Shreveport, in Charlotte, in San Antonio, in Jacksonville,
San Antonio?
in Birmingham. You get the memo?
Yeah. Did they win one in San Antonio?
Is that where I can't remember where Arkansas played Texas. I thought somewhere maybe Houston.
That's Houston. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Houston. I'm sorry.
And that probably was
those Texas towns all look
what kind of teams they were. I mean that was says a lot that was the most interesting of the games that the SEC won, I believe.
Well, listen. I mean the SEC games still count, but the ones in the bright sunshine of New Year's Day and New Year's Eve were pretty underwhelming, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Miami, Atlanta, New Orleans.
At least in the bowl season, it was a bad year for the SEC.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, de facto, I mean, the SEC hasn't gone any place. We knew that it was going to be a transitional year, and I'm not trying to build the SEC up any more than or tear. I never thought the Big Ten was that bad. I mean, bowls don't tell the whole story. I think you had a lot of programs in transition in the Big Ten in recent years. They're starting to, come into clearer focus, and Ohio State is what it is. One of the.
But James, let's talk about the future, and that's if you're a trader on Wall Street, you're not concerned about 2013 earnings, are you? You're concerned about 2015, 2016, 2017. That's what stock prices are traded. They're traded on the future, not on the past.
Yeah.
And if you're a college football fan, who has a better future right now, Ohio State or Alabama?
Well,
it's a really simple question. No, it's not. No, it's either Ohio State or Alabama. Which school has a better future?
I think, if you're talking about next year.
Let me make it simple for you, James. James, hold on.
Years, I would probably say Alabama.
James, if you and I are together in Chicago or New York on the trading floor, and some new issues of Alabama stock come out, or some new issues of Ohio State stock come out, which one are you jumping on?
Who's going to quarterback Ohio State next year? Look, I'll say Ohio State.
James, with all due respect, James, you're not answering the question. I mean, it's either Ohio State or Alabama. It's not who's going to be the quarterback. It's really a simple answer. I don't know. I'm not telling you which one the answer is. I'm just saying it's a pretty simple answer. It's one or the other. Let's continue. Steve is next in Ohio. Hey, Steve. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. First-time caller. I love your show.
Thank you.
What I called about, I'm a Big Ten fan, and I'm an SEC fan, and, the Big Ten, they look great this year, and things worked out for them. But I do understand, the SEC is probably the best conference in the country. And, Nick Saban, he's probably the top coach. But I guess my comment is some of the people, that call into your show, I mean, they just basically, they got to get over it because it's going to happen. And, once in a while, somebody's going to slip in. They're going to win. And, like my wife said, we were talking about this, and my wife made the comment. She said, she said, some of those people, she said, honestly, she said, we need to put them on the prayer list. And she
include us, please.
And, to help them get through this thing that, only God can ease their pain and help them get on with their lives. until next season. But, it is what it is. And, as a whole, I'm a Big Ten fan, like I say, but the SEC is the strongest conference.
Okay, listen, Stephen, I don't mean to move on, but I think people acknowledge that. I mean, it's all a matter of how which poison do you want to swallow here if you're an SEC fan. Let's continue. Lee is in Orlando, Florida. Good afternoon, Lee. Thanks for the phone call.
Okay, Paul.
Hey there.
Are you there?
I am.
Hello? Okay. Now, my thing is, I believe that 12 Gauge should leave because...
Are you there, is my question. We got a lot of, are you there? No, are you there? That seems to be one of the issues. Jumbo is in Tuscaloosa. Hey, Jumbo, thanks for the phone call.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Forget about what's going on at LSU. What in the world is going on in Tuscaloosa? I had breakfast this morning with some guys over in Northport, and supposedly they've got some squabbling going on between the coaching staff there. Now, we've lost 2 coaches. Have you heard anything on some grumbling going on in there?
I sure have.
I mean, is it besides Lance Thompson and Coach Steele that's leaving, or is we going to lose some
Well, I
people?
think you let me just draw a picture on the map for you, Jumbo. We talked before. You're a smart guy. All of a sudden, you have 2 defensive coaches leave. There are also 2 coaches who have been there before and left and come back. And I can't. I mean, I'm not in Tuscaloosa today. I haven't been in Tuscaloosa in a couple of weeks, so I don't exactly know what has gone on, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that there has been some issues or there were issues on that staff. And I know both Lance Thompson and Kevin Steele pretty well. I just don't think they bailed on Nick Saban unless they felt like they were either not wanted any longer, or there was friction, or there was a lot of blame going on. I mean, there's also a lot of blame going on the defensive side in relation to Lane Kiffin. Why did he make some of the calls that he did under the circumstances after the defense finally made a few stops in that Sugar Bowl? So, these things can happen on a staff. I mean, a coaching staff is no different than a household or or an atmosphere at your place of employment. When things don't go well, guess what happens? What usually happens, or what has been happening most recently on this show, is that no matter what we're talking about, the phone drops. So we'll take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Back after this.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Welcome back in. Talking a little bit about the hiring of Kevin Steele and Ed Orgeron in Baton Rouge. We heard a moment ago, some of you were away from Les Miles. Now we'll hear from Matt Moscona, who hosts very popular show on ESPN Baton Rouge. Matt, thanks for the time as always. And yesterday when your show came on, this was already out there. We knew Kevin Steele was about to be introduced. What's been the reaction so far?
Well, it's been a pretty busy 24, 48 hours, Paul. The initial reaction to Kevin Steele as the defensive coordinator was met with a whole ton of negativity from LSU fans. And they went to bed, I think, on Tuesday pretty bummed out, and they woke up Wednesday to learn that Ed Orgeron had been added to the staff as well, and that energized a lot of people. I think most people know Coach O's resume. He's got a great love and affinity for Louisiana. He's a Louisiana guy from a little town called Galliano. Known recruiter, and I think injected some enthusiasm and life into the hire. But if it was a standalone Kevin Steele defensive coordinator introduction, I don't think that there would have been many people happy in Louisiana.
Yeah, let's go back to Kevin in a minute. I mean, you're right about he didn't succeed at Ole Miss, but he is beloved, and many thought he should get the SC job after he took over and did a really nice job for Lane Kiffin, won some big games out there. Had this been in the works? I know Les talked about trying to hire him when he left Tennessee. Give us the backstory on Ed Orgeron.
Yeah, I guess you can kind of believe what you want. There were some that thought that might be a personality clash with Les and Coach O. Ed Orgeron's son is a GA on LSU staff right now, so there's familiarity, and I believe Les when he says he's contacted Ed. Now, sort of as a funny aside, our morning show on our station here in Baton Rouge has had Coach O on every Tuesday morning this entire football season, and time again they asked if he had been contacted by LSU, if he had any job offers, and time again the answer was no, he hadn't been contacted by anybody, even as early as just this past week. So I think there's some gamesmanship, but I believe less when he says he's been courting Ed for a while. But hey, Paul, you know this, but so much with coaching staffs and hires, so much of it is just opportunity. And when you have good people under contract, if you can't add a staff member, well, there's just a guy out there, and timing and opportunity is a big part of it. I think that's kind of part of it with Kevin Steele. That was kind of part of it with John Chavis leaving, and that was certainly part of it with Ed Orgeron joining the staff now.
Matt, I don't know what to believe. You're closer to it. You host an immensely popular show and that's well connected in Baton Rouge. Let's go back 2-3 weeks. Rumors surfaced. John Chavis was being wooed by A&M. My sense from a distance is that Les Miles would have done anything he could to keep him there. Why didn't he do more, or was it someone else's decision to let him go?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mentioned opportunity. If Texas A&M hadn't come courting John Chavis, he'd still be at LSU. Paul, I think you've known John long enough to know he's a very loyal man. And I don't think he was out actively seeking anything. I think Kevin Sumlin had a job offer. And maybe the biggest lure for John Chavis, aside from the fact that he could go coach at a place where he wasn't going to be leaned on so heavily like he was in Baton Rouge, but it was also sort of just being wanted. John Chavis had an extension offer on his LSU contract, and there was a clause in it that kind of became known around here as the Miles clause. And LSU is doing this with their assistants now, where their contract is tied to Les. So if Les, for whatever reason, doesn't finish out his contract, then the assistants' contracts are void as well, so that way LSU wouldn't get stuck paying an entire staff that's no longer coaching. And I think that rubbed John Chavis wrong, and I think that was probably the impetus, and there are those in the athletic department that deny this, but that was the impetus for him looking around. I think John was sitting there saying, led the SEC in total defense. I mean, really since 2009 when he came here, you could argue he's been the backbone of the program, and now this. So I think there was a little bit of that, maybe just feeling underappreciated, coupled with the opportunity that A&M presented, maybe obviously to go coach with a better offense than LSU's put on the field there in College Station. And I think all of that just sort of wound up becoming this one big sort of sandstorm into John Chavis leaving and LSU having an opening.
Matt, let's go back to Kevin Steele. And, listen, I don't know what to believe. I know him. Everyone knows him. He has had a tough couple of years. I mean, the experience leaving Clemson was brutally tough. Saban found something for him to do and eventually put him back on the field. And I'm not blaming Kevin Steele on what happened. It's not his fault. He's a very good recruiter. But was there any serious conversation or conversations with Kirby Smart, who certainly would have been an exciting choice for LSU fans?
I heard you earlier, Paul, question why would Kirby Smart leave Alabama? And on its face, that's a very legitimate question. The explanation I was given, and I'll tell you, I had no personal conversation with Kirby Smart or anybody close to Kirby Smart. So this is an explanation I got from someone at LSU, which makes a lot of sense, is that Kirby Smart, for better or worse, right or wrong, feels like the defensive credit at Alabama will always go up the ladder to Nick Saban, and that Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, only when they left Alabama when they left Nick Saban's staff, did they get more consideration, legitimate consideration for major jobs, and that seems to have worked for both of them. Again, I didn't have a personal conversation with Kirby Smart. That was the explanation I was given, which makes a little sense. If you're Kirby Smart, you could step out of Saban's shadow, run a defense at a top 10 caliber program with the athletes and the resources and all. You do well, then maybe you get that look to be a head coach. The conversations were had. I don't know if it was with Kirby Smart or agents handle so much of that, Paul. I mean, someone as part of his representation. I know those conversations were had. How serious they got, I don't know, but that explanation does make a little sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it does, Matt. Listen, I'm not in a position to agree or disagree. I really don't know. I do know that in certainly both McElwain and Will's situation, that they went and became head coaches. One succeeded, one failed. I will say that in Kirby Smart's case, he and Kevin Steele have always been represented by the same person, ironically, the same person who represents Nick Saban, that is Jimmy Sexton. So these conversations are pretty easy. You know where I'm going. Les could talk to Sexton about a number of different people in one conversation.
I don't think there's any doubt. I think something else that really is important to throw in is understanding kind of the position that Les Miles is in. Les isn't a guy that goes to the coaches convention and rubs elbows and gets out and really entertains that circle. Les does LSU football and Les does his family. So, from the beginning of this search, it was George Bass, Les's agent, that was kind of organizing a cattle call in Dallas a couple of weekends ago, and that's when guys like, Mike Stoops had thrown their name in and so on. So I have no doubt that via George Bass, Jimmy Sexton talked, and that's probably how a lot of those names circulated together. But the Kevin Steele name, Paul, it's important to know that relationship. The year Kevin Steele was out of football in 2012 when he was fired at Clemson, his son, Gordon Steele, was a GA on Les's staff. And Kevin spent the bulk of that season in Baton Rouge sort of just observing. So he got to know the staff. He got to know personnel, which a lot of those players are still here. He got to know how things run in Baton Rouge. And before Nick hired Kevin Steele back at Alabama, Les tried to hire him to a staff position in Baton Rouge. So when John Chavis left, the first two names that I mentioned as possible replacements were Kevin Steele and Ed Orgeron because of their obvious ties to the program. And had those hires been made within 24 hours of Alabama losing the Sugar Bowl, I think the perception would be a lot different. Because it took LSU 2 weeks and vetting so many candidates and perception of being turned down, how real or unreal that is, the feeling is LSU took 2 weeks, vetted a whole bunch of candidates, got stuck with a bag of cash in their hand, and ended up with Kevin Steele and saved it by adding a lot of energy with Ed Orgeron. I think there's some truth to that, but I also think that these are two guys that would have been targeted from the onset.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that, and I just don't know. I mean, to me, Kevin Steele as a coordinator, I don't know how Les handles things. There may be more shared responsibility, and besides, he has a great resume. I think just from a distance, he and Nick are close in age. They had a pretty bitter divorce in 2008. Kevin was pretty much who really brought Kirby Smart along, was pretty much yanked off the field, or at least on the organizational chart in favor of Kirby, and that hurt, and he left, and so would you, and so would have I. The fact that he came back, I thought was always very interesting. But the bigger question isn't whether Kevin Steele was the right choice or Ed Orgeron will be able to entertain the masses over jambalaya. The question is, can LSU find a quarterback and try to give that one a shot?
That is the million-dollar question, because LSU's got enough talent defensively, even with the players that are leaving early for the draft, Paul. Just by nature of the previous 2 years, with the number of early entries into the draft, they've had to play young guys, and LSU is going to be immensely talented on defense next year. And I think it would be a really tough thing to screw up. But you're right. If they're going to get to any level of legitimate competition in the West for getting to Atlanta and winning there, they got to figure out quarterback. And, I'm fascinated to see if over these next 2 weeks LSU adds any veteran quarterback, because I know they have vetted nearly every possibility, JUCO to graduate transfers. LSU's been on the phone looking at possibilities to add depth, and I don't know if they're going to. Chad Kelly was one of them that they passed on, who ultimately signed with Ole Miss, and I think LSU passing has been proven to be a wise decision after what happened with him in Buffalo just a few days after signing with Ole Miss. And you hear Braxton Miller.
Yeah, what is Matt? What is the deal on Braxton Miller, if anything?
look, I have no doubt that Braxton Miller. It's up to Braxton Miller if he wants to play quarterback, because everyone at Ohio State that I talk to says J.T. Barrett's the guy, because he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. He runs zone read. Look, as impressive as Cardale Jones was, and look, in 16 minutes, Cardale Jones may tell the world he's going to the NFL. But Braxton Miller, coming off an injury, won't even be able to throw until the summer. It may very well be a situation where Braxton Miller's standing there saying, okay, do I want to be a receiver at Ohio State or go somewhere else and play quarterback? And even if he wants to go play quarterback somewhere else, I don't even think LSU is a great landing spot because of the system. I mean, if a place like Oregon might better suit Braxton Miller's skill set than what LSU does. If Braxton Miller wanted to come to LSU, I don't think there's any way that the coaching staff wouldn't find a way for him to be on scholarship and play a year of football. But I don't know how legitimate that is. I think it may become more or less legitimate in about 15 minutes when Cardale Jones makes his announcement.
I know you have a show coming up. I could talk to you all day. It's that entertaining, Matt. Thanks for the time, and let us know how the soap opera plays out in Baton Rouge. You know, you got my number. Call me anytime. You got it. Great stuff. Thanks, Matt. All right, Paul. Matt Moscona, truly one of the most plugged-in talk show hosts in America on ESPN in Baton Rouge, giving us the lay of the land, and as entertaining and as compelling as it was, I learned a lot. I just don't know if I know much more in relation to LSU's future under Les Miles. We'll continue that conversation and more guests, and Cardale Jones's announcement, too, coming up in just a few minutes. Don't go anywhere.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We're back, and the events are underway in Cleveland, and not a betting man, putting a couple of bucks down on Cardale going pro. We're going to cover it as soon as he comes to the microphone, and they're introducing everybody but LeBron so far. Let's continue with more calls. Jim is in Las Vegas. Hey, Jim, thanks for the call.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate your show and your objectivity in answering your questions.
Sure.
It's kind of a subjective question regarding the current format that we're experiencing in the NCAA. And I was surprised to see that who ended up in 1, 2, 3, 4 positions, as well as most people were, to some degree. But the question that I have...
Jim, I hate to interrupt. Let me put you back on hold for a second. We're going to switch to, I apologize, we're going to switch to Cardale Jones, about to make his decision. No Johnny Manziel in Cleveland right now, but Cardale Jones is about to take the podium and let us know what he's going to do. And most people believe right now he's going pro.
Play football or any collegiate sport to make it to the next level, but at my point in my career, I feel like, it's the best for me to go back to school, and one of the most important things for me to do is to graduate. So when I make that decision, to play in the NFL, I want to be done with school. I want to devote all my time and all my effort into the film room and getting better at playing the quarterback position. So thank all you guys for coming out. I mean, I don't know why you guys made it such a big deal, but I mean, like I said, it was very simple for me, man. The NFL, after 3 games, was really out of the question for me. So thank you guys again, and you can open up for questions.
So Cardale Jones has thrown some more deception at the wind. The most effective move he's had in 2 weeks against Alabama on 3rd and long. He is coming back. We all started to get the impression he was coming out. Kirk Herbstreit reported about 25 minutes ago that he was hearing that he was coming back. That led an array of rumors and speculation, and like everyone else, we bought in. But Cardale Jones, more deception. Act like, what's the big deal? I mean, you have a press conference in Cleveland. It makes sense that you're coming back to Columbus, but then again, that's where he was today, so maybe we should have read something into that. So a very interesting decision, and what does that mean for Braxton Miller now? He's back on the phone with who knows how many other schools. So always like surprises in college football, and we certainly had one here in the last 25 or 30 minutes. We'll go back to the phones, and we were talking to Jim. Jim, sorry about that. Didn't take long, did it?
No, that was really quick. I think it was a good decision on his behalf, too. It's not as if he had played numerous games and also had the support like he did, like Jameson Winston did with Jimbo Fisher. so it takes a little different complexion for him. But getting back to my initial pondering the format that we're currently in versus the format that we had experienced in the NCAA championship series or bowl series. The thing I look at is, inasmuch as I think a lot of people were surprised who actually played in the playoffs as a result of a playoff system, I'm kind of curious, not that I'm taking anything away from those persons that won all the championships in the past. Had there been a playoff series, I wonder if the SEC, for instance, would have won all 7 of them. And another question is that would we have experienced something like Auburn and Tubby Tuberville did when they had an undefeated season and didn't even get a shot at it?
Let me try to answer it very quick. Jim, let me give you a quick answer. The answer is I don't believe the SEC would have won 7 straight because there were a lot of reasons why they did, and I won't go through all of them. The first one was a big upset when Florida beat Ohio State with Urban Meyer. You have the Alabama-LSU game. How would that have turned out? I think that year they would have won. TCU would have been in the playoff a couple of years ago as well. So, I mean, the odds of the SEC getting past the first round and winning the second game all those years, I just don't think is possible. Although, last year, interestingly, this year the SEC was hurt. Last year the SEC would have had 2 schools in the playoff. So, I mean, I will not sit here and say 7 in a row. I think there's a lot of luck involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look at it, and I hadn't heard that question raised because I don't want to take anything away from the schools that won the championships. Obviously, that was the format. That's what we were going under. And as a result of that, what can you say? The teams that were proposed to play, the winner won, period. So I certainly appreciate everything you do for the sport, and I appreciate the fact that you're very objective and it's not just an opinionated blog. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I really do appreciate your call. Let's check in with Jared, who is in Tennessee. Hey, Jared, thanks for the phone call. Good afternoon.
Hey, buddy. First time calling, man. I just want to say I love your show.
Thank you.
I've been a Tennessee fan my whole life, and, you're an alumni. We couldn't be more proud of you, buddy, and hope God continues to bless you and Big Ten John, and that the show continues to grow. And I got a couple quick questions. First off, when you was in Tennessee, did you ever cover the Bernie and Ernie show?
Jared, I sure did. My last 2, not my last 2 years there, but I covered them for the school paper.
The Daily Beacon.
Exactly, and knew both of them very well. Traveled with the team. Ernie and I became good friends, and Bernard and I did as well. And it was one of the most extraordinary times of my life to cover. You obviously know enough about Tennessee. At this particular moment in time, Tennessee basketball was more important than Tennessee football. The football program had just made a coaching change, and things were up in the air, and basketball was king in Knoxville.
Yeah, they were on Sports Illustrated, and both of them was from New York, sure, and I think you was from New York, too.
Yeah, the name of that cover, now you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It's not a big deal, but the headline was Double Trouble from Tennessee. I still have a copy of it somewhere in my files, and it was one of the most exciting days ever on the UT campus because back then that really mattered. Sports Illustrated, unfortunately, now doesn't matter very much.
That's awesome, man. And also, Tennessee's got Alvin Kamara coming in. He was an Alabama commit. And him, along with Jalen Hurd, what kind of 1-2 punch you think he'll be, and what kind of running back is he? Because I know he's committed to Alabama, so maybe you'd have some insight on him.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Joe. I've heard good things about him. I think that it will be a really good punch. And I tell you what, I like pretty much everything I see and hear about what Butch Jones is doing. Again, Cardale Jones, curveball today, after some of the brightest people in the business were beginning to speculate he was leaving. He said, "Hey, I've only been a starter 3 games. That's silly going to the NFL." Rich is next. Rich is in Atlanta. How are you, Rich?
Fine, thanks, Paul. Thanks for taking my call. Hey,
Sure.
real quick, in regards to Alabama graduation rate, according to the Bobby Dodd Award that Coach Saban won here, I think it was 75%, and also you had 7 kids that actually completed their master's degrees, which is outstanding. So that's according to the Bobby Dodd Award. But I wanted to ask you about Cardale Jones, and maybe even John could help because he's an NFL guy. Paul, when these guys apply for the underclassmen, doesn't the NFL have something that basically tells these kids where they think they would be drafted? Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, in this case, it may have been a little bit difficult. There wasn't, a tremendous amount of data other than the last 3 games, but I'm sure he got a pretty good evaluation. I'm also told, based on what I'm reading right now, that Urban Meyer flew up to Cleveland today, not that long a flight from Columbus, and talked to him. I'm sure Urban gave him an evaluation from talking to NFL friends, and I'm sure Urban gave it to him straight.
Yeah, well, the straight part is what I'm wondering, because doesn't it behoove the NFL for him to stay in college, especially at that position with the short body of work that you mentioned?
Well, I mean, listen, it's one thing if you're Johnny Manziel or Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota and you come out and it's just a matter of where in the first round you're going. I mean, no one in their right mind, at least not yet, was projecting a high pick for Cardale Jones. So it was more of a project. And listen, I probably would have gone. I mean, I know it's cliche to say, oh, you always make the right decision to stay in school. Sometimes it doesn't make you don't make the right decision to stay in school. But he wanted to do it, and good for him. I hope he doesn't regret it next year.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And again, that's why I was questioning if that's an independent person that gives him that grade, because
there's only so much.
It's a free farm system in college.
It is, and but I'll say this about Urban Meyer, I mean this. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but Urban gathered information for him, and I'm sure he gave it to both sides of it. And by the way, if Cardale had called me or you, Rich, we would have given him the same information. You're going to be. You're not going to be a first-round pick. You do have a chance. You'll spend a couple of years holding A.J. McCarron or Johnny Manziel's clipboard, assuming that they're holding the clipboard for the starter. And coming off of the high that Cardale Jones has been on, he may have said, you know what, that's not enough. That's fine. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, that's good, Paul. Hey, real quick, I just want to compliment the young lady from Baton Rouge, Yvette. Paul, she was more knowledgeable and lucid than 95% of us that call, and that includes me. And I just wanted to just give her her due. I mean, boy, she was definitely plugged in. Obviously connected.
No doubt.
And
hey, thanks, Rich.
I just wanted to thank her for that. See you, buddy.
You bet. Good stuff. Cardale Jones has made his announcement. We'll get Tom Luginbill's reaction to that in a moment, plus more of your phone calls at 855-242-7285.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We're back, and we're talking to Tom Luginbill. We were talking a few minutes earlier. And Tom, before we even overanalyze, if it's possible, what's going on with Cardale Jones now, the decision to stay, let's go back to the recruiting of him, and who was he, and what was he all about?
Well, those who follow recruiting know that Glenville High School in the state of Ohio has been a very prominent school, produced a slew of fantastic players, including Teddy Ginn, and it's been what a lot of people would, I would say, term to be a feeder school for Ohio State. If you go to Glenville and you're a great player, there's a high percentage likelihood you're going to end up at Ohio State. This was a player that was a very physically gifted player, but also a very raw player. And I would contend that to some degree he still is, because he hasn't played a lot. But he was taken by Ohio State, I think, for 2 reasons. Because there was talent to mold over the course of time without forcing a guy to play right away, because he is a redshirt player. Then they ended up placing him from a prep school standpoint. So he actually has a 2-year head start of maturing, developing, coming along. And listen, truth be told, this was a guy that was, and I think Urban Meyer would say, was not very mature, had a long way to go in terms of some of the things that go with being a student athlete at the collegiate level. We can all recall the tweet that he had sent out a couple of years ago, and I believe that if he hadn't matured, he was probably on his way out of that program. And so He showed me, I think he showed Urban Meyer and that staff that he's capable of growing up, understanding what's expected of the position, embracing the accountability and the responsibility that comes from playing the position, even when you're not the starter, because you never know when you could be. And now he's just found out what happens when you do embrace that responsibility, you do grow up, you do act properly, and good things will come, and that's what happened with him.
What happens now, or in spring, I should say, when the most eagerly anticipated competition in a long time begins?
By the way, can you imagine this offseason clutter for Urban Meyer to have to deal with? I mean, this is going to be a daily thing. That's all anybody's going to talk about in the offseason. In my view, in my estimation, knowing the three that they have, I think that J.T. Barrett is the best player for the offense. Run to pass to efficiency to accuracy, athleticism, all of those sorts of things. Work ethic, attention to detail, love of the game. I would take Braxton Miller and I would move him into a utility role on offense where he could be a wildcat quarterback. He could be opposite in the shotgun of Ezekiel Elliott, and they could do some zone reads, speed option stuff. I'd put him in the slot because if Braxton Miller wants to play at the National Football League level, it's not going to be at the quarterback position. Why not give scouts and coaches a full year's sampling of your athleticism, your speed, your power? I mean, this isn't a good athlete. This guy is a remarkable athlete, but there are better quarterbacks on the roster. I think the competition will come down to Cardale Jones and J.T. Barrett. I think they will utilize Braxton Miller, assuming that he'll be there in a variety of roles. And the starter at Ohio State will be the player that commits himself to the attention to detail that it takes to be a great player. Not a good player, a great player. That's film study. That's off the field things. That's weight room stuff. That's all the things that go with playing the position. I think that's why J.T. Barrett flourished so much. And so it'll be interesting to see, now that Cardale Jones has a taste of it, just how hungry he is to remain the starter.
We know how good they were. We all saw it. How much better can they be next year?
Well, everybody's back, by and large, especially the players that they've relied upon so heavily to make great plays. And I think they're going to be healthier and more deep next year at the perimeter players, the skill spots on offense, which is going to give the quarterbacks even more options. Certainly the schedule benefits them. If you've looked at it this year, it might be better than it was this past year and the year before, which was, in my estimation, two remarkable schedules. This is a team that's going to be difficult to contend with, and they're going to be a team that isn't going away because now the ball's rolling. It's not too dissimilar to what took place at Florida, and if you remember that 2006 team coming into the season, that was not expected to be a national championship team. That was an inherited team with some new faces here and there, a Percy Harvin, a Tim Tebow, and then when they got a taste of it, it exploded. And I think that's probably the most important thing to take away from this is we've seen this before with Urban Meyer coach teams. Now the snowball's headed downhill.
Chatting with Tom Luginbill. Tom, let's move ahead a little bit to recruiting. And I don't know how many times people can praise Alabama's class, but take a swing at Alabama's class. How does it compare to other great classes, and what happens over the next 3 weeks?
Well, I think if you look at the last 2 or 3 classes for Alabama, what they've done a remarkable job of doing is addressing where they had maybe glaring needs within their own team. And when I say a glaring need, I'm referring to a need that even a fan sitting in the stands can say and go, oh, boy, we're just not very good right there. So where are those needs? They got to add at quarterback. They've done that with Blake Barrett. They've got to continue to add in the defensive secondary. They've done that with Kendall Sheffield as a corner who just verbally committed, and they did that in last year's class with Tony Brown and Marlon Humphrey. So in my estimation, the areas where they feel like they've been deficient is where they've made their most hay. And I think that's, to some degree, over the past several years, and Florida State's done this well too. They've addressed areas of importance at critical premium positions. I'd say the same for Ohio State. If you look at Ohio State's dominant players on the defensive side, it's been on the defensive front with Joey Bosa. It was at the corner position this year with Eli Apple. Certainly at the quarterback position, they recruited well. And so those are the types of positions that aren't standing on every street corner. And I think that's what separates the good from the great in recruiting. There's receivers, there's running backs, there's all those types of players all over the place. But those teams that make a difference, that win the championship for you, not just play for the championship, those are the positions that Alabama seems to load up at.
We've spent a lot of time tonight talking about LSU, what they have, what they don't have. I realize they have 2 quarterbacks, although LSU fans aren't particularly happy with either one of them.
Right.
Is there anything in the system?
I think in time they're going to be really happy with Brandon Harris.
Okay.
I just think it's a matter of time. In fact, I think within the next 2 years, this could be the dominant team in the West. We saw what they have on the perimeter at the skill spots as true freshmen. It wasn't just Leonard Fournette. It was Malachi Dupree. It was Trey Quinn. All these guys just true freshmen. There's not a lot of football teams that take the field at positions of youth the way they have and won the way they did. Now, it wasn't pretty at times, but you couldn't expect it to be. I think they're only going to get better. Certainly on the defensive side, their recruiting standpoint, that thing makes a big deal having Kevin Steele and Ed Orgeron come on board.
Yeah, and you know, fans aren't really happy with the resume of Kevin Steele as a defensive coordinator,
Right.
but give some perspective on him as a recruiter.
Well, I think that's what stands out. He's always been a valued recruiter, and that goes to everywhere he's ever been. You know, everybody talks about the process, and whether you're referring to that process being Alabama's process, from a player personnel perspective and from an approach of being able to identify not only the best player, but the right player to fit what you do, that's where I think Kevin Steele does a really good job. And listen, you're in the state of Louisiana. You don't have another competitor within your state like an Alabama does to an Auburn. So you're basically trying to put a fence around your state, keep your best players at home. And listen, I've always been of the belief that you can be a really good coach, and if you don't have any players, you're not going to look like a really good coach. And so people can say what they want about Kevin Steele, or you can say what you want about Ed Orgeron. You get players, you're all of a sudden a pretty good coach.
In the SEC East, there's just an amazing amount of enthusiasm and excitement in Tennessee. What's going on with them recruiting-wise?
Well, I think there should be. If you look at where they're at right now, where the process started with Butch Jones, if you go back to building last year's class, which we saw a lot of impact from this year on the field for them, both from the junior college ranks and as true freshmen took the gridiron, it all fell in line with a couple of things internally. Revamping their academic and athletic structure of how they can help aid student athletes and academically from a progress standpoint, completely revamp that side of things. While this was going on, they were able to complete what I would term to be probably the best football operations facility in college football outside of Oregon. And so you marry that up with excitement and enthusiasm from the coaching staff, a season in which I think a lot of people thought they'd finish the same way they finished last year, go 5-7. Instead, they become bowl eligible, they get a big win, and maybe more than anything else, the importance of that period, when you end the season and you play your bowl, to be able to have kids come on campus and you're actually practicing and your team is out there, that is huge when you're laying out the blueprint for the foundation and the building blocks going forward. And there's a lot of enthusiasm. Guys are jumping on board, and they're another team that, in my opinion, is doing as good, if not a better job than anybody in college football at recruiting the defensive front right now.
Tom Luginbill with some thoughts on Cardale Jones and National Signing Day, which
right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
That's it, man.
Thanks so much.
You bet.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Welcome back in as we roll on. Let's go to Jeff, who's next up in Chicago. Hey, Jeff, thanks for the phone call.
Hey, look, no problem at all, Paul. I'm happy to call in because I'll tell you what, last couple of weeks, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's since the SEC took a dump all over itself starting on New Year's Day, but it's a lot easier to get through on these phone lines.
It is. Well, I mean, we were pretty close. I was about to call you, Jeff.
I know. Hey, look, I don't blame you. I mean, it's kind of like
I had you on speed dial and Jim from Tuscaloosa.
Excellent, man. I mean, it's kind of like crickets down there right now, except, well, if you're you, it seems like the knife keeps twisting now, doesn't it? First, you were wishing Cardale Jones away to the NFL, and it comes on to promptly announce what he told everybody a couple nights ago, which is that he wasn't ready for the NFL and he was coming back. That's why he's wondering why he has to go through the press conference. He already announced it after the game the other night. But hey, if that isn't bad enough, you have this clown show, so to speak, that's going on at LSU right now, Paul. I mean, but look, I mean, wishing Les Miles away as their coach, I mean, that's certainly nothing new for LSU fans, right? I mean, they've been trying to get rid of him for a while. I mean, this is a guy who got into a blunder war with Derek Dooley once upon a time, with too many men on the field or whatever. I mean, look at what happened this year. Notre Dame was a hot pile of garbage down the stretch of the season, losing to Northwestern at home. But luckily, they said to themselves, look, we got LSU on the bowl schedule, guys. It's time to get right. And they went out there, and even though the score was close, they pretty much dominated LSU in that game. I can't even believe I even just spoke those words. I mean, after all, LSU, once upon a time, was undefeated and the best team in the country. You remember that, don't you, Paul?
Vaguely.
It wasn't long. I mean, look, it wasn't long ago at all. But let's face it, weren't they really undefeated that year because of a couple things? Number one, the SEC as a whole just sucked out loud that year. I mean, what do you have? John L. Smith, Houston Nutt at Ole Miss. They had Kentucky on the schedule. Gene Chizik was in the middle of a total free fall. I mean, this guy was, he was rolling through the conference. Then Alabama misses a bunch of kicks. Alabama's doing the same thing to the SEC that year. And then, lo and behold, those two teams somehow end up in the title game. And now both coaching staffs are like watching an episode of Days of Our Lives, Paul. It's a total soap opera in the Deep South. Everyone's in a free fall. You know what I'm wondering? I'm starting to wonder how many championships that Pete Carroll and USC would have piled up over the SEC if there was a 4-team playoff during that entire time. I'm going to go sit and think about it and watch the soap opera that is LSU and Alabama unfold, Paul. We'll see you later.
A lot of hating from the Windy City, the bastion of Southeastern Conference enthusiasm. Shorty is up next. What do you say, Shorty?
Hey, how you doing?
Okay.
Did I hear you right a while ago when he was talking about that caller that brought up, asked you a question about the SEC winning all the national championships in a row, and you said that you thought that Florida had an upset against Ohio State that year?
In 2006, that's exactly what I said.
Well, how did you figure that? Did you watch the Ohio State and Michigan last game of the season? Neither one of them had a defense to stop the other one, and Florida had a pretty damn good defense that
Shorty,
year.
listen, my job is not to make things up. It's to remember what I saw, and Florida was an underdog to Ohio State. Michigan and Ohio State were 1-2, and Florida was fortunate to get into that game. A lot of people were campaigning for Michigan and Ohio State, so I vaguely remember the year. It's been a long time, but I'm willing to put more than a nickel down that Ohio State was a big favorite in that game.
Yeah, they were a favorite, but like
That's all I said.
neither one of them had a defense.
Well, I wasn't commenting on the offense or defense. I simply was talking about it. It was an upset because Ohio State was the favorite. That's all I meant.
Oh, okay, well, because I watched that. I bought into all that hype about Ohio State and Michigan, about how great they were, until I watched them play each other and found out neither one of them had a defense that could stop each other.
No, that game was, 42-41 or something. I do remember it.
Yeah. And then they came down and played in the championship game, and Florida basically pretty much shut them down.
Yeah, outside of the first score of the game, you're right. Listen, I'm not really all that anxious to go back and replay a game from 8 or 9 years ago. I just simply made a statement.
I'm not neither, but I just thought it was kind of ironic. I know that Vegas had them by a bunch.
Yeah, well, that was my point, which I've made 4 times.
All right. Well, you have a good day then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's all I was saying. Go back and repeat what I said for you 3 people out there who still care that it was an upset. I'm not sure what our friend Shorty's point was, other than did I watch the In fact, I didn't watch it, if truth be known. I was at another game that day, and I was one of the 5 people in America that did not watch the Ohio State-Michigan game. But I saw the highlights on Fox Sports 1.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Welcome back, second half of the program, and I hope you've been around. First hour, we spent plenty of time talking about the situation with Les Miles and his new defensive coordinator. Mixed view on whether Les has made progress or not. Tom Luginbill joined us as well, saying, watch out for LSU. He thinks Harris will be a great quarterback, and we certainly trust Tom Luginbill here. He said that team is loaded in the future, and they need to be based on some of the criticism of the program here on the program. We're also unveiling, in deference to the Oscars coming out today, the Finebaum Awards. The hashtag is the Finebaum Awards, and that's where you may vote. Pretty easy to find on social networking. So go to the polls, as they say in South Chicago, early and often. Right now, we will get back to the phones here, and Ken is up next in Memphis. How are you, Ken?
I'm good, Paul. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much.
I hear all these people getting on here talking to you and talking about Alabama and all these other teams, but do people really look at the recruiting list that Nick Saban does?
I would think they do, yeah. I mean, he wins recruiting every year.
Right, but I've been looking at the list here lately, and I don't know how he does it, but he's got a kid, a running back coming out of high school that has committed to Alabama that rushed for over 6,700 yards, high school, scored 119 touchdowns. I hear people talk about how he doesn't rebuild, he reloads, and if people will just watch his recruiting and the list of kids that he recruits, they'll see why Alabama gets the people they get.
Well, let me say this, Ken. I mean, we've been down this road before. I mean, Henry, a litany of Alabama running backs have knocked out big numbers. But my question to you is this. What does that mean down the road? Because Saban had a bad season this year, okay? He finished number 4 in the country. Last year, bad season, finished number 7 in the country. I mean, it's all a matter of, how you're measuring programs. I mean, if Alabama doesn't win the national championship, it's a bad year. So we're not talking about Alabama going 8-5. We're talking about Alabama not winning the national championship. That's how narrow the margin of error is. And right now, if you talk to the experts, now again, does that really matter? No, it doesn't. This year, you know what every expert said? Every expert said Florida State was going to win the national championship, and it wouldn't even be close. Didn't happen
I
that
knew
way.
they wouldn't win it because of the season they had. They won so many games by the skin of their teeth.
Well, no, you didn't know. Hey, you didn't know that when the experts made the preseason predictions, though.
Well, I kind of had an idea they wouldn't. I mean, it's just
you and I agree with you. I didn't think they would either.
We're going to catch up with them sooner or later.
I had a better pick than Florida State. I went with Alabama.
Well, so did I. People would just look at his.
Hey, I'll tell you one thing though, Ken, we were closer than Florida State, and you know why? Alabama lost 5 hours after Florida State, so they were in it much longer.
Correct, and they're going to have to put it together next year because that's 2 years in a row. They've gone to the dance and not been able to complete the program.
I mean, listen, I think. Are you talking about Alabama?
Yes.
I mean, I think there is some pressure on Alabama right now because Nick Saban is held to an incredibly high standard, and we've had this conversation all week about is he the he was the best coach. He was on his way to becoming the best coach of all time. Now he's not even the best coach in college football, according to the same group of experts that picked Florida State to win the national championship 2 years in a row. So I mean, it's a fine line, and that fine line is really it comes down to one play here and one play there. And you and I both know, with all due respect to Ohio State fans, that Alabama at 21-6 needed a play and maybe put that game away. And guess what? They didn't come up with it.
Right. I think the turnaround was when Ohio State punted the ball and it actually backed up on them. And the first play from scrimmage, Blake Sims threw that pass. It was intercepted. The way they were running at the time, I don't know why Kiffin didn't just keep running the ball instead of the first play from scrimmage being a pass.
Well, you're not the only one, and I think that's always the issue. Just like Ohio State, preseason favorite, they have 3 quarterbacks. I mean, will they be the same team next year? Will they be as hungry? No. I mean, it will be a totally different conversation. They have a manageable schedule. But they end the season, though. Don't forget. They open the season at Virginia Tech. We'll turn that into a grudge match, even though I don't know too many people that believe it will be. But it'll be a Monday night game on Labor Day, and everyone listening and watching will watch. But they end the season. They don't play really anyone for most of the year, in spite of all the Big Ten promoters trying to convince us it's a great league. But they do close the season with two very difficult games in Columbus against Michigan State and then at Michigan. I don't know what Michigan's going to look like, but Michigan will be more competitive than they were last year. I can tell you that.
Right. What's your opinion on Alabama's opening game next season against Wisconsin?
I mean, listen, Alabama will be the favorite for the 20th year in a row in every game. I would take Alabama right now against Wisconsin because Wisconsin will have a new coach, and while he'll be pretty familiar with the Alabama program for obvious reasons, everyone is. I don't, but again, that's a long way off. But Wisconsin will be a formidable opponent. There's no question.
All right. Well, I tell you what, this is the first time I was able to get through to you. I appreciate you taking my call, and I think you have a fine show. I watch you almost every afternoon over all the other shows, and I really appreciate your thoughts and what you have to say about.
Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate your call from Memphis, a city that I'm pretty familiar with, considering I was born there. Andy is up next. Andy keeps up with us from Ohio, Big Ten country.
Speaking of Big Ten, formidable opponent, Wisconsin, and they've got 8 months to try to learn how to implement the forward pass.
Hey, Andy, you know this better than I do. All they need against Alabama's defense, 3rd and long. It works every time.
Maybe if you got Cardale. But, hey, Paul, it was just fantastic to hear that announcement today. It was even more fantastic after hearing a troll like Clay Travis get on your show yesterday and talk about how Urban Meyer does nothing but recruit all the wrong kinds of people and create a monster and felony arrests and blah, blah, blah. And I'd just like to note, there's been none of that in 3 years in Ohio State. And I don't think some of our...
I said that. And listen, I like Clay. Clay and I have been friends a long time. But I thought Clay was much more effective trolling the Alabama fan base than he was doing Ohio State.
Yeah, and it was even better to hear Cardale's announcement today. I mean, he's a kid who a month ago was best known for a tweet that he put out after he got a B on the test instead of an A 2 years ago about, come on, man, we ain't here to play school or something like that.
And I think there ought to be a statute of limitations on that tweet. I'm tired of seeing it.
Well, you know what? He vanquished that tweet today because before today, he was then best known as this big kid who just did amazing things on the football field and won on every big stage he was put in front of. And then I just thought it was a masterful move today. He went back to Cleveland. He's an inner city kid. If you know anything about his story and how he was brought up and the tough life that he had, he was there with Ted Ginn Sr., who's a guy who helps kids like Cardale Jones advance and have a chance in life. And he went and he was congregated in front of all of those kids who are going through the same sort of thing that he went through. And he stood up and he told them, it's great that there's some slim chance that I could be drafted first in the NFL, but my education's more important, so I'm going to come back to Ohio State. And, no one made a better career move than Cardale at that point. I can't imagine he's going to injure his draft stock over the next year. I'm sure that Ohio State's going to take the Texas A&M move, and he's going to be insured at this point when he's coming back when he is draft eligible. And someone who's got all of these accolades and all of these check marks along the line, even if he doesn't make it as a pro, I mean, do you think he's ever going to have a problem being a small business owner or employed in a great fashion in the state of Ohio anytime the rest of his life, Paul?
I don't, but listen, he made a good move. There's no question. But Andy, let me say what everyone says. He has to finish it. Now, I've seen a lot of great quarterbacks, not great quarterbacks, but quarterbacks who own the moment and then they go back and they have a hard time. And I think he has challenges ahead of him. You're a smart guy. You know what I'm talking about. It's going to be difficult from here on.
I don't even know if he's going to start next year.
Exactly.
But, I mean,
exactly.
But Matt Castle's made a nice little chunk of change coming out, not being a starting quarterback in college.
Sure.
Either way, it's going to give him more time to develop. And as I said before, any of these three quarterbacks, any decision they want to make, other than transferring to that school up north, it's fine by me and should be by any other person in the OSU fan base because we should just be grateful. It's just, oh man, just fantastic, good feeling, wonderful times across the entire college football landscape. That's the feeling down there.
Andy, let me ask you a final question. Are you enjoying the success of Ohio State, or are you enjoying the failures of Alabama more? Which one is it?
Failures in Alabama is kind of harsh. You know what I mean? To say it's failures, in listening to the show over the years, I can understand the fringe fan base is more vocal in some programs than others, and I hope that we don't ever get up to the fever pitch with Urban Meyer that the fan base has with Nick Saban, because I can understand walking away from the game the way these nut jobs run off about everything with what he's achieved there. So no, I'm much happier with the.
Okay, I'm good. I'm glad to hear that because I would be disappointed, Andy, if you were guilty today of Schadenfreude. That would be personally devastating to me. Thank you so much for the call. Let's go to one of the more rational Alabama callers, and that is Larry.
Damn, is this the Big Ten Network?
Larry, what'd you say? What'd you think of your old buddy Andy trashing your program?
My God, let's just start a shrine for that dude, man. I mean, he's talking about a fan base. When we won a national championship, we didn't bust out in the streets, burning things, having to call the fire department, the police, get the riot squad out there, use tear gas on them jerks.
Well, because and do you know why, Larry?
Yeah, because they beat Bama and won the NAC. Whoop-de-doo. And Andy Gump, this has turned into a charade, dude. He just gets on here and I wonder how many cases he got out of that deal when they rioted. I mean, what a fan base. Hey, at least we're rational in Alabama, Jack. We talk like
hey, time out, Larry. T.O., baby.
I'm mad.
What do you mean you're rational?
Dang right I am. And I will tell you something else.
Explain. I would love to know because I've never been to Alabama or lived in Alabama or worked in Alabama. Explain to me the rationality of the Alabama fan base, please, Mr. O'Blake.
Okay, brother. No, don't go there. Let me tell you something. You go in every store around here, everybody you see got Bama pride tied on them, baby. They got it hanging all over them because we're Bama, and we've been there before. Them Yankee Doodle Daddies up there get one national championship, and you think all of a sudden the whole world should stop. We're rational about it. Okay,
Larry, first of all, I don't think this is Ohio State's first national championship.
I understand, but in how long, Paul, since they got busted for their players?
2002, Larry, when Jim Tressel
That's a long, dead, burn time, son. I'll tell you something else. You talk about our recruits. Hey, let me tell you something. 12 players in the playoffs in the pros from Bama.
Really?
Okay? That's right. And what happens to our running backs? They go to the pros. I don't see a bunch of them Ohio State.
No, Ohio State's never sent any running backs to the pros. I guess you're not familiar with Archie Griffin, are you?
Oh, I'm talking about recently, Finebaum. I'm just telling you the truth facts. I don't make stuff up like Andy Gump. And he tries to make this guy, he got up before, and they all spoke to the players, and, they had church service, and, then they went out and rioted and burned stuff.
I mean, Larry, listen, I feel like I know you pretty well. I mean,
I'm bad, man.
I mean, Larry, let's cut to the chase. 2 weeks ago tonight, seems like a year ago, your team got whooped.
Well,
you got knocked down. Yeah. You got sand kicked in your face.
Got ass drug up and down the field. Hey,
and you know what I was? You have to learn. Listen, losing is tough, Larry. Sometimes you got to. But sometimes the quote. Hold on a second. But sometimes the quote, the professor of intelligentsia in Reeltown, Alabama.
Intelligentsia, what now?
You have to take it like a man, Larry.
I ain't no.
You got whooped. Now. You got stomped on. You got kicked on both sides, and just congratulate Ohio State and let it go.
In that studio, I would give you an RKO, boom, right now, both damn times.
We'll be right back.
Hey, at least we're rational in Alabama, Jack.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Welcome back to our program. I look forward to visiting with more of you at 855-242-7285. We mentioned Cardale Jones coming back for another season at Ohio State. There had been a lot of speculation and even reports that he was coming out. Alabama getting some good news today. The defensive tackle, Jerron Reed, and linebacker Reggie Ragland, both outstanding players, coming back as well. So the Tide lost 3 key players last week, but retains a few on this Thursday. Hank is up next in Jacksonville.
Hello there, Mr. Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I love your show. I watch it every day. I tape it and spend about 4 hours of my precious time listening to all this stuff.
Thank you.
If you give me a few minutes, I'd like to rant a little bit like you give Jim and Tammy and some of them other Alabama yokels. Start with, I'd like to say is I think you're a big hypocrite. The reason I say that is because of the way you run your mouth yesterday about Florida fans needing to drop everything about Urban Meyer. Start with Urban Meyer is no different than the part I'm talking about hypocritical with you being cutting down Jimbo Fisher and Florida State University. I'm not a fan of theirs, but I sure don't like to see them be cut down when Urban Meyer pulled the same stuff at Florida as Jimbo's done there at Florida State. Another thing, everybody sat there and give that love fest to Urban Meyer yesterday saying what a genius he was, winning with a third-string quarterback. If you think being a genius is playing your first-string quarterback at the end of the year, the best quarterback on your team, and playing your second and third-team quarterback because you knew they were going to get hurt, you're going to end up with your first-teamer to beat Alabama and Oregon with, well, he is a genius. But to tell you the truth, he's no more different than Jimbo Fisher. And I done found out another thing about Alabama, too, is that they got a different word in their dictionary for due diligence. And you said you knew Saban and Bill Battle did their due diligence. So the new word in Alabama for due diligence is 6'5", 340 pounds, defensive lineman. Over, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. And mostly I appreciate you watching our show every day, in spite of what you think of us, for 4 hours. This man is no hypocrite. But he is Manuel from Austin, Texas. What's up, Manuel?
What's going on, Jack?
Okay, Jack.
Hey, you know what? Can I be honest with you? I don't think Larry knows the definition of rational. I honestly believe, real down deep in his heart, he really does believe Bama won the national championship this year. I honestly believe that.
They were number one on New Year's Day.
Well, yeah, they were, and they shouldn't have been. And you know what, Larry? You want to know the last time Ohio State won a national championship? How about a couple of days ago, Jack?
That's a good line. I like that.
And they whoop your butt, drag you all up and down the field. They came down from the north to your backyard in the south, pulled your pants down in the middle of the Sugar Bowl and stuck it to you, Jack. Good Lord. Rational? I don't think so. Not even close. But you know what? Let me say something about what's going on down at LSU. Whenever a coach starts replacing assistants, whether it be because they left willingly or you fired them because they weren't performing or whatnot, the next person that's going to be doing the hiring and firing ain't going to be the head coach. It's usually going to be somebody up a little upper on the totem pole trying to figure out how they're going to replace you. I saw that down here in Texas when Matt Brown started replacing, when we finally ran Greg Davis off, and here's to another point. That town that left LSU to go down to Texas A&M and coach that defense, he's in for a rude awakening. I don't know why this is, but teams that run offenses the way that A&M and Auburn and Oregon run their offenses, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what kind of defensive coordinator you get, the defenses rarely live up to expectations. And we saw that down here in Texas when we hired that kid from Boise State, when Boise State was hired. I don't know if you remember. His name was Steve Harsin.
Oh, yeah.
Hell of a, I guess, we thought he was an offensive genius. Well, he cost Manny Diaz his job as a defensive coordinator because the defense spent so much time on the football field. By the halftime, they were so gassed, there's nothing else you could do. And Manny Diaz lost his job, and I have a feeling, that guy that left LSU for A&M, he's going to find out the hard way. It ain't all this high touch to be when you're playing with a good offense. That's all I got to say, Paul.
Okay, Manuel. Thanks. Appreciate the call. Always interesting. Jim is in Atlanta on this Thursday afternoon. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Paul. How are you doing?
Okay.
Two quick things. I'd like to congratulate Cardale Jones for making a very wise decision and the fact that he took wise counsel from those around him and those that care most about his future, not just his future, but football future, but his life. The other thing I want to mention is the reason that as Buckeyes living in the South, we disrespect the SEC chant. And here's why. There's no doubt that the Alabamas, the Auburns, and the LSUs won national championships during that run. But teams like the Georgia Dogs didn't win squat since 2007, yet they have the gall to yell SEC when they did nothing to deserve it. I'll hang up. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's all fair. The SEC marches together when it's to its advantage. But, listen, I did a book on this. There's a lot of reasons why the SEC is boastful, and there are a lot of reasons why people hate the SEC. This show has absolutely nothing to do with any of those.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN Radio app.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.